Hi there. Welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. Glad that you could join us. We have headlines, plus a look at how the design sector in Detroit is growing. But we are starting tonight with a One Detroit closer look at the regional transit plan the RTA is shopping around Southeast Michigan. At the same time, the State House is taking up a debate on a proposal for cities and townships to opt out of the RTA plan. Let's bring in our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of WDET Radio. Hi, guys. How are you?
Great to see you.
It's a good week. It's good to see you.
You have a different cup than we do.
Do I have a different mug than you do? I mean, these MiWeek mugs are pretty rare and special.
Yours has got
it must be
coloring at the top.
A MiWeek 2.0. It's lipstick. That's your lipstick on there. That's it. All right, let's talk transit. So I think it's very interesting. The RTA is going around to several communities and saying, this is our plan now, and kind of gauging where people stand with this. At the same time, in the State House, they're saying, well, maybe we should just have an opt-out plan for some cities and townships. Doesn't this totally go against what a regional transit system could be, Nolan?
Yeah, it's a mess at this point. They're trying to hodgepodge something together just to save it. I think they should pull it off the table and do what they should have done from the beginning. Go back and create legislation that creates a truly regional plan, one system. And they can do that. I mean, they've got to do the political work to do it. But that was what SMART was supposed to be when it formed, and never became that. And I think that's what this has to be before it's going to be acceptable.
Well, you're in an election year right now, and we're going to have a serious turnover in the House and in the Senate, Stephen.
Yeah, well, they're not going to do what Nolan is suggesting, and it's because there are all of these sort of pratfalls that surround that question: political, geographic, racial, economic. And those are the things that have tripped us up on transit for 40 years. And I don't know that you can just sort of blunder through those things. Maybe if you had a governor who was pushing something like that, the legislature might have the appetite for it. But right now, what they're going to do is they're going to pander to all of the kind of fears that people have, the irrational fears that people have of creating rational mass transit in Southeast Michigan.
All right,
so you're going to spend billions of dollars then, and this isn't going to work.
Well,
I don't know that it's not going to work. I mean, the plan that's on the table is pretty good. It involves everybody. It is very different from the plan that voters narrowly rejected just 2 years ago. I think if it gets to November, it has a good chance of passing.
All right, so hang on. Let me tell you this. Well, they were having these meetings all around the community. They're having them in Detroit. They're having them in Oakland County. They had one in Macomb County, and I wanted to go to Macomb County because Macomb was the one that turned it down last time, and also Oakland County. But you also have Macomb County Executive Mark Hackle, who said, I'm not going to support this, and I wanted to hear what people in Macomb have to say. Go ahead and take a look.
Macomb County, late last week, among the stacks at the Mount Clemens Library, the talk centers on transit and more buses. It's a public meeting to explain and get feedback on the Regional Transit Authority's Connect Southeast Michigan plan, a $1.5 mil tax increase that needs voter approval. And if regional transit is ever going to be passed, people in Macomb County need to buy in.
I say this is not a protest because it's a promote.
Promoting what?
People using the bus.
Sherry Wells is a booster of SMART's fast bus service that started this year.
But this fast bus, it's every 15 minutes, which is wonderful. And then I got realizing that's what it's been every other city I've been at for decades.
Fast has routes up and down 3 major regional corridors and out to Metro Airport.
Yes, and the fast bus goes down Gratiot and it stops at the Eastern Market and it's got to stop at Comerica Park.
The Connect Southeast Michigan plan builds on FAST, continuing to integrate bus systems in Macomb, Oakland, Wayne, and Washtenaw counties. It's based on Wayne County Executive Warren Evans' proposal to add more bus routes and create a commuter rail line from Detroit to Ann Arbor.
First of all, our region is changing, and so when I say investing in people, the people in our region, we're getting older, and we definitely need more mobility options. On the flip side, millennials, we have more millennials living in our region now, staying in our region. They don't want to necessarily drive and get around the region the same way that generations in the past have.
The RTA's presentation showed how far we trail other cities funding mass transit, like Indianapolis, Nashville, and Columbus. Those cities are also finalists for the new Amazon headquarters, a bid Detroit didn't get because of a lack of transit. According to the RTA, Connect Southeast Michigan would cost an additional $10 a month to a homeowner with property valued at $150,000. Leon Drolet is a Macomb County commissioner and was a vocal opponent of the transit tax in 2016 and the plan now.
This plan still banks on things like commuter rail and trolleys and buses. As much as they try to wrap in some of the new language to update that language, the money is going toward, it's essentially zombie transit that's already dying, if not dead.
I'd rather pay my $120 a year to get the roads fixed. You know, I'd rather pay the $120 on my taxes. I mean, I haven't ridden a bus since I've been 15 years old, and I'm 70 now. So that kind of tells you what I feel about the buses. I feel sorry for folks who can't afford a car, the high price of insurance. I love to help them out, but I do vote for SMART every year. I think that's a good system, what it is. But I'm kind of done paying for everybody else. That's my argument.
Voters failed to approve the RTA's millage request in 16 by a slim margin. The RTA has more work to do as it tries to bring this new request to the ballot this fall.
I would say overall there's been a lot of support for the vision, and so we'll be taking that feedback back to the board and working with them to talk about what changes need to be made to see if this vision can be implemented.
Okay, so I think we're still hearing the same arguments that we heard back in 16 of I'm going to pay $120 a year and I'm not going to necessarily see the benefits of this regional transit plan. And so you have people in northern Oakland County and you have people in northern Macomb and parts of Macomb saying, this is never going to touch me. Right. So how are we ever going to move beyond that argument in terms of when you're talking about an entire region, you may be paying for something that does not run by your front door?
Or that you're not going to use. I mean, I think the basic issue here that we still haven't got around is you got to convince people who are paying for a bus system now they don't use to pay for another bus system that they don't believe they'll use. And I don't think the pushers of this proposal have done a good enough job of convincing people that this is going to be useful to you. And you know, until they can make that happen, well, yeah. I don't think it has much of a chance.
So they've got to be able to shape and mold this into some kind of ballot proposal and then vote to get it there, and then start to convince people. And you've got a timeline that now is starting going to run a little short.
It's pretty tight. I mean, I think it's worth doing, if for no other reason than that, you know, this is something that has to get resolved in this community. You can't continue with what we have, and we just saw. I think it was this week, a story about the discussion that the Amazon folks had with people in this community after we didn't get transit, if we didn't get their second headquarters. Why didn't we? The first thing they said was, you don't have the kind of transit that we need to get people around. Losing out on something like that, and we could talk about the pros and cons of Amazon itself, but if Amazon believes that, there are other people who would come to the state of Michigan, who would come to Southeast Michigan, who would also point that out and say, we're going to go somewhere else. This hurts us economically, and you've got to get people. What you really have to do is get people in the state of mind where they're not thinking about how does this directly benefit me, but how does this benefit the region in a way that ultimately benefits us all. And we have gotten really far away from that in the way that we vote and make decisions in this community.
But that's a philosophical greater good conversation that I think that we have kind of changed our narrow focus in how we talk about things.
How come everybody else in the country can have that conversation and come up with solutions that make sense? There's not something inherently wrong with us in our DNA that prevents us from doing it. It is cynical narrative spun by our leadership, I think, that do it.
Name another community that's doing it this way, where they're trying to meld now 4 separate bus systems.
Chicago.
4 separate bus systems? Chicago's got an overall transit.
Chicago has the CTA, which runs the buses and the L in Chicago. It has a suburban train line that connects to the L. It has suburban bus lines that operate independently in several communities. It's not one system, but it operates as one system. It functions in a way that people
Do they have an advantage, though, because they started their mass transit long time ago?
They've been at it a lot longer than we have, and there's no question that when they were doing these things, some of the impediments that we are dealing with now probably weren't really on the table. But you know, it's not true that every other community has a single transit authority. They do in some places. Maryland is a great example of where the state runs all of transit.
But you have different modes of transportation there. This is all buses, and they're already paying for the SMART system, which was supposed to be regional transit. Detroit opted out in the beginning. Then you had suburban communities opt out, so it's not serving that function. Why not work off the platform we have instead of trying to sell a third system?
You don't have to sell me on that, but I mean, the hurdles to that include the mismatch between those two systems that exist. You would really have to dissolve those two systems and start over.
And perhaps, but are the hurdles there greater than the hurdles of getting this on the ballot and getting it passed?
I think talking about leadership is a big thing as well. When you look at what certain people are pushing for and what they're not pushing for, the larger conversations there. All right, but I would encourage people to go ahead and look at this proposal. Go to the RTA, look at what they're proposing. Go to some of these meetings and ask some questions. We'll see if this actually makes it to the ballot in the fall.